Hello, I'm Parmjit Dhanda from Back Heathrow. This is a reboot of a video you may already have seen. If you haven't seen it, it's really important that you do watch it. It's about Heathrow's third runway. The government wants plans in by the summer for a new runway. So we spoke to Matt Gorman, MBE, very senior director at Heathrow Airport. He told us how that process is going for them and a little bit more about what it could mean for us all. So do watch it. Participate. We want as many people as possible engaged in this process. So if you like it, don't forget to share it. Thank you. We're actually in the boardroom of Heathrow Airport here at the Compass Centre, and my special guest is Matt Gorman, MBE. He is the program lead for expansion, amongst other things as well, director of sustainability, carbon strategy. He has played a very, very big hand in the 2.0 sustainability strategy for Heathrow. And like I said, he's program lead for expansion at a time when the government has called for a proposal because they want to build a third runway. Quite exciting time, Matt, isn't it?
Really exciting. And I mean, just to set the scene for your members and listeners, Parmjit, I think you'll know the story that the Chancellor made a speech in late January announcing support for Heathrow, which we welcomed. I think we were really pleased that the speech recognised that Heathrow does something different from the UK economy than other airports. As a hub airport, we pull long haul and short haul traffic to fill up planes that serve a huge range of destinations around the world. An amazing statistic that struck me is that you can reach 92% of the world's economy in a direct flight from Heathrow. And it's not just people travelling, it's goods as well. So we are the largest port by value in the UK, £200 billion worth of trade each year. So what the Chancellor's invited us to do is to come forward with updated proposals for expansion by this summer. So my role is to bring together the team internally that's working on that.
Brilliant. And we're going to have a little bit of a pick at that in a moment. But you mentioned it. It's the government did this, made a speech in January. In fact, I think it was on the 22nd. The hints became really strong because the Chancellor was in Davos. And then it was the 29th. It was the week after. You and I remember, had a conversation back in November. And I don't know whether you were there, but I remember Thomas Worldby speaking at an event, the Airlines UK conference actually, back end of November, where he said the government really has a few months to make its mind up. Because you were pushing plans, you were looking at plans and other things that could be done here. And I wonder whether that helped focus the government's mind on, well, if there's going to be change, as well as everything that was happening economically and politically there, whether that actually made the difference. Because the movement from November to January, and that crucial day on January the 29th, where, I'll use a quote here, it's a nice quote to run by actually, Rachel Reeves said, "So I can confirm today that this government supports a third runway at Heathrow and is inviting proposals to be brought forward by the summer." By the summer. What was the mood like in this building when that happened?
I think we welcome the speech, really excited to hear that kind of support from the government. I mean, I think we had seen demand recovering from the pandemic. You'll know that in the many years leading up to the pandemic in 2020, Heathrow had been full, and part of the case that we'd made is that we risked losing some of our routes and the connectivity that benefits the UK to other airports, and we could see that situation coming back. And Thomas, I think rightly had pointed out that actually for a project like this to succeed, we do need the right support from the government, and I think that message had landed. I mean, it's worth saying up front that as we work on our proposals, the other thing that we're setting out is where we think the right policy framework is needed from the government to lower the risks of the project and help make it something that our airline customers and our shareholders crucially can support as well.
And what is it? What is it that we really need from government then to make sure that this time it really does happen?
Well, I think we'll be saying more on that in the summer when we submit our proposals, but we've already talked publicly about three broad areas: planning reform, airspace change, and the right kind of economic regulation for Heathrow. And I'm sure we'll explore those a bit as we go through the conversation. The very quick headlines: planning, the Chancellor set and the government has set an ambitious goal of planning approval by the end of this Parliament. We rightly have to go through a robust planning process called the Development Consent Order to build the infrastructure, but we think there are ways that could be sped up towards that goal of 2029 approval. With airspace change, that has its own approval process, which at the moment would take longer than the approval for the infrastructure on the ground. So if you're an investor, you'd potentially be in a situation where you have approval to build terminals, but actually the airspace isn't yet confirmed. So you need those two things to work more closely together. And then for economic regulation, we and indeed airline customers have said that for a project of this scale, investing over many years, we think we need a different regulatory approach so that it's the right charging approach for airlines as our customers ultimately, as well as the right returns for our shareholders.
Yeah. And would you say it's too early just now to talk about some of that kind of level of detail that's percolating from communities about their backyard or the proposals from last time and how different they'll be this time? Is this something that generally you're still working through before you can actually pin down any kind of like, oh, hang on a minute, this wasn't quite there last time, or that's changed?
So you asked about input from communities and where we are in the process. It's worth just setting the scene first on where we are. We'll submit proposals for the government, and ultimately they need to back those proposals. We would still go through what's called the Development Consent Order process, the planning process. So there'll be extensive engagement and consultation on our plans through that process. That said, we are always interested and wanting to hear from communities on issues that are important to them. It's worth saying that over the last month or so, we did an engagement session with the Council for the Independent Scrutiny of Heathrow, setting out, really just reminding people of where the plans got to last time and giving people an opportunity to provide any feedback. I think you've got some questions from some of your members locally, which I'm very happy to address as far as we can today. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is that we are developing proposals for the summer. So there are, and we've got so far in that, but that job isn't complete. So I'll be able to share as far as we've got at the moment, but there's still a lot of work underway.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of those questions, we've got a few here to look at here and now, actually. We've picked a few of the best. If your question hasn't been called on this occasion, there'll be plenty of other opportunities, as Matt says. I mean, this consultation will go on for some time. Firstly, we have one of our young activists, Ben Nelson West, who lives in Hillingdon. He recently started his first job, and he's really interested in jobs for young people.
In the original extension plan, 10,000 apprenticeships were proposed. My question here is, are these apprenticeships still going to be included in the new extension plan?
Good question, isn't it? And not the reason that we picked that one is because from our supporter base, lots of people work here on the campus of Back Heathrow supporters. Trade unions very interested as well. And a lot of work has gone on over the years, not least with David Blunkett, in terms of developing those plans for those thousands and thousands of jobs and apprenticeships. Where does that sit now within the new programme that you've got to pull together?
Well, it will remain really important for us. I mean, let's just take a step back and remind ourselves that today Heathrow is the largest single site employer. Well north of 80,000 people work at the airport behind us day to day. So, and we already have a very strong focus on apprenticeships. We think about Heathrow Airport, the company I work for, but the wider Team Heathrow, the airlines, the ground handlers, the catering companies, air traffic control, the huge range of different operations at Heathrow. I mean, the thing that always strikes me is there are very few careers and professions that you won't find somewhere in the airport operation. So and we have a real focus on apprenticeships and skills development today, and particularly actually focus on the local community, to Ben's question, opening up opportunities, raising awareness of the kind of careers available at the airport at primary level, at secondary level, into further education. So strong focus today. I can't give a specific number on apprenticeships in future. That will be part of the plans that follow as we update them. Worth remembering that the last plans we developed were at least 5 years old now, before the pandemic, but I can absolutely reassure that strong commitment to skills development and apprenticeships will remain, and that by its very nature, expansion at Heathrow will create a significant number of jobs, both in the airport, the running of the airport, in the construction phase of the project, and also in a much wider supply chain across the UK.
It's interesting, this area, because obviously lots of local community support has been around jobs, opportunities for the local boroughs in particular. But you mentioned how things have changed in the last 5 years, and all kinds of figures have been spouted around by government and others, and people doing research on this. But a really particularly interesting area is industries that have grown over the last 5 years. Big focus, for example, on SAF industry, and talks of tens of thousands of jobs there possibly. Quite interesting also to hear the Prime Minister saying a few days ago, we must protect the steel industry. Because all of a sudden, if we don't have a steel industry, how are we going to build a third runway? It's quite... So in many respects, there may even be a growth of opportunities here, Matt.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you've touched on a really important point there, Parmjit, that actually, if I just speak for a second on the environmental side of the third runway, where we've always been of the view that growth and the benefits I've talked about don't have to and shouldn't come at the cost of environment, and operating within a set of clear and growing within a set of very clear environmental targets. But there's a real opportunity in that as well. The government talks a lot about green growth and green jobs, and many of the technologies of the future we think, offer real opportunities for jobs and growth across the UK. You mentioned sustainable aviation fuel, where work by a group called Sustainable Aviation, our industry coalition, has set out the huge range of investment opportunities in the regions and nations of the UK, with tens of thousands of jobs potentially, as you say, an investment. And I think that is one great example of where some of the technologies to take the carbon out of flying will also create economic opportunity.
Now, one of the wonderful things about leading an organisation like Black Heathrow is we have people spread around the country really come up with all kinds of thoughts. And you've just set me on a little tangent here, because one of the questions that we had actually from someone in East London who's a Black Heathrow supporter is, on the subject of SAF, this person is involved, Simon's his name, on the East London Waste Authority. And he says they handle millions and millions of tonnes of domestic waste a year. Some of this is recycled into fuel. And he'd be really interested to know whether there's more that local authority waste organisations like his own can do to actually help creating sustainable aviation fuel. Have you got any thoughts on that? I know I'm throwing this at you a bit randomly, but it's an interesting question, isn't it?
No, it is, and I think welcome approaches like that. I mean, as an industry, not just Heathrow, across the UK, we've identified that converting waste, could be municipal or local authority waste or agricultural, in some cases industrial waste, into sustainable aviation fuel is a real opportunity in the UK for a number of reasons. There is lots of waste. We're a large population in a relatively small island. We've got some real chemical engineering expertise, some brownfield sites to build the plants. We've got a range of pipelines to move that fuel around. So one of the big cases we've made to the government actually is that what's called the second generation of sustainable aviation fuel made from waste is a real competitive opportunity from the UK. So if there are members out there who would like to talk about that, please do get in touch. Certainly, we as Heathrow at the moment are not an investor in production of SAF, but there are many companies out there that are, and they're looking for long-term supplies of feedstock.
So there you have it. I mean, there's an opportunity. live as we're talking. But I think it's really important that these kinds of ideas do actually percolate, because you're really in a thinking stage before you get stuff to government. And the next couple of years are going to be really fascinating as well as you consult on those plans. Now, you brought us on rather smoothly to sustainability. You haven't had any advanced look at these questions,
I have not, no.
But it does bring us on quite nicely to our next question from Julian Bassett in Wandsworth.
I'd like to ask if Heathrow will be funding new rail links, in particularly for the Western Rail Link and the link from the southern region to Heathrow, because we really need to get people off the roads and out of their cars and onto public transport to get to the airport.
Now, before I bring you in on that, I mean, a lot said about Western Rail Link. We have very active MPs like Dhanda saying a lot about it. Perhaps Southern Rail gets ignored a little bit as well, because, I mean, the linkages and the benefits to the airport and for public transport and decarbonisation are huge there, because it would link Terminal 5 with Chertsey, Virginia Water, Staines, Basingstoke, Woking, Guildford, Twickenham, Richmond, Hounslow, Waterloo. You know, there's a lot of connectivity to be gained, and then you add to that Western Rail as well. And that's an interesting question from Julian in terms of how much of a priority are these rail links? And a fair question about, have you got any ideas of how the money is going to come together to be able to make these happen?
So I'll give you a sense of where our thinking's on that at the moment. Again, the proposal's very much under development. But again, as with the last question, it's worth just starting with where we are today as Heathrow. So over many years, we've had a strong focus on what in airport speak we call public transport mode share, the percentage of our passengers and indeed colleagues who travel to the airport on public transport. And historically, we've invested in the Heathrow Express and the Elizabeth line. So not far off half of our passengers use public transport to get to the airport. We were at around 45% by the end of last year, which is a really strong performance already. It is worth saying we're very well connected into London with the Piccadilly line as well as the Elizabeth line and the Heathrow Express. We will want to look at connections out to the west. As I'm sitting here, actually, I'm looking kind of broadly west and southwest at where Western or Southern rail links might go. We think an additional rail link or links are likely to be needed with the airport in future to meet some of the public transport mode share targets that we'll want to. The Chancellor was clear, and the government has been in its positioning, that where the benefits of those schemes are very much for the airport, there's a role for us in funding. What we've also said is that actually some of these schemes have broader regional or indeed national benefits. So we'll want to have a conversation with government as to where there might be an airport contribution, where there might be a role for a wider contribution. But I think we'll be very keen to look at those links again. Also worth saying that while inevitably we talk a lot about rail links, which are very important, Heathrow has huge bus and coach connectivity across the UK, so we'll be looking to build on that and develop that in future as well.
Are they setting you some parameters around the proposal that you've been charged with your colleagues to send into government by the summer?
How do you mean?
Are they saying, right, okay, we want to know this much on public transport and the level of detail, how it's going to be funded, how it's going to be working, this much on decarbonisation, this stuff on air quality? Because obviously, I suppose Labour's 4 tests are an element of this, but there's also been a level of interpretation in terms of what those 4 tests actually mean. There's never been that level of detail around it. So I'm just curious as to, when you put these proposals in, have you been given any kind of level of guidance from government? It's a very interesting question from Julian around those particular things like Western Rail. Have they said to you, well, what's the contribution going to be like to this, or is this going to be delivered as part of the scheme, or has it really been left to you to say this is what we can do?
Well, we're in active conversation with the government at the moment on exactly what information we'll be able to provide by the summer and what they need. If I just take the example of, and you'll understand there's a limit to what we can say while we're in the middle of that work and those conversations. Just taking the example of the 4 tests, though, and just to reassure your members and anyone listening to this, we have always been clear that expansion at Heathrow doesn't need to be and shouldn't be a choice between growth and the environment. And you'll know that over a series of years, we set out our plans on the three big environmental issues for growth at Heathrow: noise, local air pollution and carbon. We'll be updating those plans, but our commitment to expanding while reducing those impacts and operating within very clear environmental targets remains.
Yeah. And let me be a little bit more Brian Waldeny, just for a second on this, because you're also chair of Sustainable Aviation, very, very important organisation. So you'll be aware at the same time of the pressures the government has come under with Gatwick, Luton, and how agreeable they've been to that, as well as being very, very positive about Heathrow. But you're confident that all of that can be achieved and it can meet their 4 tests. And also to do that within their very, very ambitious timetable of they're talking about you getting this in by the summer. Consultations are beginning in late 26, early 27. For government to agree this by the end of this Parliament, sometime probably in 2029, and to have even more flights taking off behind us and over there by 2034.
So let's start with the first part of that question on specific. You referenced sustainable aviation. Actually, I stood down as chair after a 2-year term last summer, but I have continued to be very involved in that group. So we set out. Actually, the UK aviation industry was the first anywhere around the world to set net zero 2050 as a goal and publish a detailed plan to get there. And that shows how we can grow significantly as an aviation sector. We set up to around 70% by 2050 and reach net zero through a mix of more efficient aircraft, sustainable aviation fuel that we've touched on, zero emission hydrogen aircraft and carbon removals as well. We are absolutely committed to that plan. We've always said, as well as industry action, it absolutely needs the right policies from government. SAF is the sustainable aviation fuel, the single biggest measure in that plan. So we've been pushing for a combination of a mandate, which came into law at the beginning of this year, and the right incentives for investors in SAF as well, which are coming through from government. So with the right policy framework, yes, we're confident that can be achieved, but we need to be held to account on the plans we've published. More broadly, we think that we welcome the ambition that the government set. We think approval of the plans by the end of this Parliament is achievable, subject to the right planning reforms, and the government is working on those. And we're just working through the detail of exactly what the construction timeline might be after that as well. But we welcome the ambition that the government set in that space because of the real economic role that Heathrow plays. And as I said earlier, we are now back at capacity as an airport as of the last couple of years. We are in competition with a series of other European hubs which have capacity, but increasingly 3 big hubs in the Middle East, Doha, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, as well as Istanbul as well. So it is there's a real need for the UK to build out capacity at the hub.
Yeah, and regular viewers of our Back Heathrow broadcasts will be well aware, and you'll have seen over the period of time, how things have waxed and waned with the courts, and you're quite right, planning acts and can make a difference in that, and hopefully this one may have a sense by the end of the year. But also the politics. Hasn't it changed in an extraordinary way over the last decade? And I think for the first time we've kind of got all of the major parties pretty much aligned on this, aren't they? That must make you feel a little bit more relieved with the ups and downs that we've had over the years in terms of the politics of this.
Yeah, I mean, worth remembering that the airport's national policy statement voted on in 2018 did win an overwhelming majority at that stage and remains policy. But you're also right that I think a renewed statement of political support is important. I think key to that support is really 2 main factors. Firstly, the huge role that Heathrow plays in the economy and the opportunity for growth. We commissioned a study which talked about a 0.43% contribution to GDP by 2050, which is a really significant amount, and with 60% of that benefit beyond London and the South East. But also key to that political support is the right strategy on environmental issues. We've talked about noise, air pollution and climate change, and the right plans on our community impacts locally as well as the positives, some of the downsides of expansion. We need to have robust plans on all of those.
And I'm glad you've moved us onto community benefit, actually, because we've had a number of questions for you on that. And I was out the other day in Harmondsworth with actually some friends from Heathrow, meeting people from Harmondsworth, Sipson and Longford. One of the people that we met was Joan. And the next question has come from her. It was part of a longer piece, really emotive piece, actually, very good the way that she put her point forward. So if you want to see the full thing, do visit our website. But here's basically the focus of what her question was about. If I can just get this working. Here we go.
I just want to know, is this going to go ahead and when? Because we need some clarification. This has gone on for so many years. We're living in doubt. We'd like to do our properties up, but we can't because we don't know if we're wasting our money.
Now, it was really interesting. It was great to have her there. I could not believe the level of support, actually, from local residents for a third runway. Pretty much every hand in the room went up for all different reasons. Some people work there, some people have a passion for the airport. For others, it was about blight and wanting to move on. And a lot has been said over the years about world-class compensation. Now, it's really important for the communities around Heathrow and people like that, people like Joan, her family and her neighbours, to have that as part of this scheme. There was some plans in place last time around. Are there any assurances that you can give? I know you can't go into any detail, Matt, but the kind of schemes that were planned and hoped for, if it hadn't been slowed down by various legal challenges, then COVID kicking in, are we looking at world-class compensation again?
So, I mean, what I'd start by saying is that we absolutely recognise some of the anxiety that comes through in that question from Joan, and that that sense of uncertainty causes, and we're keen to provide certainty as quickly as possible. Just to recap on the timeline, we submit proposals to the government this summer. They will need to ultimately confirm those proposals and confirm that we're able to move ahead with our plans. But we want to provide that certainty as soon as possible. Specifically on property schemes, we will be reviewing our property schemes, and would invite anyone with views to feedback on those. Our community engagement team are regularly engaging with communities around the airport, and so we think we have a pretty good view of what people saw as the good elements or the elements of our schemes that could be improved last time, but welcome that input. Unfortunately, I can't say anything immediately today on exactly what those schemes will be, but what I can absolutely say is that we will provide certainty as soon as we are able to on those schemes and our plans for the runway.
And the communities engagement team were there that night, and it was actually a really good discourse, because so many people will tell you, oh no, everybody that lives in the communities around the airport are against it for this reason or that reason. Well, that certainly wasn't the case. But at the same time, there was a really strong view that this time people want certainty. And they want this to happen. And to be able to get on and move on with this. And I think the airport certainly needs that. It's a thriving place behind us, but it's going to take on the next step and be not just a world-class airport, but be the #1 airport in the world. It's absolutely crucial. Do you feel a sense of momentum here? Have you got what you need? Because there's a Herculean task here for you and the team to get all of this done and sorted and in by the summer. Can that be done? Are you confident of that, or should we say, considering the past, realistic and expect some slippage?
Well, I think worth remembering there was a huge amount of work done on the project previously, so it's not as if we're starting from scratch here. And this is a stage in the process where we submit a set of updated proposals to the government, but there's then several years of further work on the planning process, the so-called development consent order. So I think we're confident in being able to share plans with the government by the summer. We also think it's important that actually we maintain a sense of momentum building on some of the support from the government. Worth underlining that point that I have throughout, that we think there are a number of policy areas, I've mentioned planning, airspace, economic regulation, where we as a business, our shareholders would need to be comfortable as the right policy framework actually before we move ahead and invest more as well. But I think what we are keen to do is to move that conversation as quickly as we can, partly in response to some of the questions we had, in order that we can provide certainty as quickly as we can as to what our plans are. But I would come back to the point overall. There's a huge amount to do, but it is exciting. Heathrow is a real asset for the UK as a hub airport connecting around the world. 92% of the world's economy in a single flight is a huge competitive advantage to the UK. But we've got to expand within clear environmental targets. At the same time, we're confident we can do that. Actually, I think there's a huge opportunity for Heathrow to drive change and role model what green growth can look like. We're going to have to do that. So I think fundamentally that's what keeps me excited and engaged on this, is delivering for the UK and the environment at the same time.
Yeah. That's really crucial. One of the questions that we have had, well, we've had several questions which are quite intriguing because they go into some of the history. Some people have been around following this project very, very closely for a long time. And people will always want to tweak things, sometimes heavily, and we'll talk about with some alacrity around the M25 and the length of runways and stuff like that. When you're looking at this, some of that really big stuff, it's probably fair to say you're not looking at meddling with those by changing the length of runways or anything like that at this kind of stage in the game, are you?
So you asked about how far we're looking at some of our previous plans. I mean, I think any business 5 years on would just want to take stock of the plans it had previously, have technologies changed, have circumstances changed at all. So, and I won't prejudge what we might say to the government in the summer. We'll want to look at the plans. Equally, it's worth saying that the plan we had last time was arrived at after significant consultation and development, both by us, but other bodies like the Airports Commission as well. So it feels like a solid starting point.
That's a good point. I mean, it wasn't pulled out of the air. It was years of consultation. You go back to the Airports Commission and all the rest of it. The Airports Commission did end in a parliamentary vote. What's your feeling? It's early days, I know, but is this likely to result in a parliamentary vote again? If it did, I mean, it is looking pretty good in terms of Parliament as it sits today, but I suppose it creates another layer, doesn't it, of what would need to be completed?
Yeah, I mean, the government, ultimately that will be a question for the government. They'll need to form a view on, do we need to review any elements of what's called the Airports National Policy Statement, and does that then lead to a vote? I think you mentioned earlier in the conversation that the politics, the nature of cross-party support that for the project now is different than we've had, not at all points in the past, but at some points in the past. But I come back to the key foundations for that parliamentary support will be a combination of the economic benefits that we can deliver, doing that within clear environmental targets, and we're confident that we can do that.
Yeah.
So.
And finally, back Heathrow supporters out there still engaging, still very involved. I've certainly found since the announcement in January a level of excitement out there. They're really keen to turn out. They're coming to events. They're asking questions. They want to move this on and get this done. Have you got a message for them? Is there more that they can do to help with the project? Is there anything more that they can do in terms of their engagement and responses to consultations that you're looking for as well? Because it does strike me that there is still more to do. That level of engagement is going to be important, but now's your chance really to talk to them directly and let them know what you think and what more they can do to help with this project.
No, brilliant. Well, I think I'd say three things, actually. I mean, the first is thank you for all of the engagement today, and indeed for the three questioners, that three members of Back Heathrow who provided questions today. thank you for those questions. I hope I've been able to at least give some answers to those, albeit we're still in the process of developing our proposals. But firstly, a thank you. Secondly, do continue to engage. We will be, we're working through the detail of how we submit our proposals to the government. As I said, beyond that, there'll be a period of years working through a planning process with lots of opportunities for consultation and for feedback. So do continue to engage in that process and continue to show your support for Heathrow. I think Back Heathrow has done a great job of both providing a means for local communities and individuals to show their support, but also to challenge the airport. And that would be my final point. If you think there's things that we could do better, things that you'd like to see more of, do ask about those things and do challenge us as well, as some of your members have today.
That was a great day with Matt Gorman in the boardroom. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, feel free to like and share this with your friends. If you didn't, do send your feedback as well, because it's really important to hear from everybody in these kinds of debates about major infrastructure. Heathrow's third runway is the biggest infrastructure project in Europe. We're really proud here at Back Heathrow to be leading the campaign with over 100,000 supporters to help deliver that. If you want to be part of that, please get in touch. Do join us. Join the campaign for economic growth and jobs. Until next time, bye-bye.